Ladies and gentlemen, next up, we're exploring how AI and blockchain are opening the doors to financial markets for more people across Africa, breaking down barriers to access, education, and opportunities in the digital trading community. This seems to be a very interesting and intriguing topic. Please welcome the host from the Top Trading Network podcast.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining us. I think we are now getting deep into our conversations.
Yes.
Yeah?
This next one, I think for us, when we were presented with it initially, we were like, okay, no, we're here to learn.
Yeah.
And we're always open. One thing about the platform or us, myself and MJ, we're always open to learning something new from someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the amazing gentleman before us here, Mr. Ansel Adams, the founder and CEO and board member of the Dominion Investment Holdings Africa Blockchain Institute. That's quite a lot of work there, but I think we're going to dive deep into it. My good sir, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I must admit, I'm a bit starstruck. When I checked your YouTube video out, I thought, ish, maybe I made a mistake, man. I shouldn't be joining you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think before we actually get into it, our topic is agentic inequality. And I think a lot of people are probably like, okay, what is that? What is that exactly? So can you just give just a brief description of what it is? And then I think we'll just break it down as we go.
Yeah, basically, it's the disparity that exists for not having access to autonomous AI agents in terms of availability, quality, and quantity. And so you would find that some people have access to it very readily. So when you use generative AI, you could write business plans and strategies within 5 minutes. And those who don't have access to it, they'll take 8 to 12, 14 months to do something similar. So you can appreciate the distinction that exists between the haves and the have-nots. So it basically is not having equal access to these type of tools. And it's a stratification, I think, from a South African perspective that adds to the complexity of the poverty, unemployment, and inequality nexus that exists in South Africa.
Wow. So I think for years, inequality has always been about money. Should we then say now that it has now become more about who has the best technology to execute?
I think so. South Africa is quite unique in the sense that it's an economy that is characterized by two pathways, the formal and the informal economies.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And what you're finding in South Africa is that the stakeholders in the formal economy are the kind of entities you see around here. And what they're doing is they're obviously using the tools because they have access to it, readily access to it, to continue the status quo. In the informal sector, you have the unbanked, the underbanked, people that are not globalized, that doesn't readily have access to these kind of tools, right? And so these inequalities exist, right? But you can imagine that if a bank like, for example, Capitec Bank, released its results a few weeks ago, and it is the most expensive share price on the stock exchange, and 20 million of their customers are of the informal economy, then you can begin to understand that there's disparity needs to be understood and needs to be addressed, and the kind of tools that we're talking about needs to be sort of understood and designed to help sort of, address these inequalities. So it is ultimately about money, but I think it's about the design phase in terms of how to sustainably get to making money, particularly from an informal economy perspective.
Yeah, and I think, with a lot of Africans, I think a lot of Africans were very mobile first. So we kind of skipped the desktop stage, and then a lot of Africans, obviously because of technology, were given mobile phones, and a lot of traders also operate from mobile phones. But also, how do we ensure that those people are not particularly left behind? Because I'd like to believe those people are also, a lot of Africans are disadvantaged in that regard. So with the mobile first generation that we live in, how do we make sure that a majority of Africans are not left behind?
So from a design perspective, maybe when it comes to agentic inequality, a lot of the technology that people are using on the continent at the moment are designed by developers that don't really understand the complexity of that real world, right? So a lot of the AI algorithms, for example, and the blockchain solutions that we are using are designed by first world technologists that are sort of projecting how they see the world on top of us. And it's no surprise that the application and adoption rate of these technologies are quite low. You know, there's a high failure rate. The number that we're talking about between 75 and 85% failure rate in terms of the adoption application of these technologies in these particular communities. So what our thinking is about is to say when we design these algorithms, it has to now include the lived experiences of the end user. The end user as a stakeholder now must be central to, you know, not only the design, the development and the feasibility of these tools, but also from a policy perspective in terms of what the policy needs to do and how it needs to cater for viability at a grassroots level. So when people use their cell phones, they are just users of it, you know, but they don't have any understanding necessarily of how to deploy it, you know, for the benefits of their own communities or where they are from. And I think we need to change that, right? So I said to you before we started that my observation of what I'm seeing at the conference here the last 3 days are not, you know, necessarily people or products that are changing the status quo. And the status quo in South Africa in particular is a failing economy, apartheid design economy has been failing since the mid-80s, that through transformation can't create sustainability and viability going to the future. But what I'm seeing here are tools that are being developed to sustain that. Not tools that are necessarily designed by understanding how one can create a future sustainable South African digital economy by sort of integrating the formal and informal economies, by really going down and digging deep into what the actual need is. Here we're seeing tools that are being deployed just to sustain and maintain what has been going on for the last 100 years.
A lot of businesses are adopting the nature and the culture of AI, and most slogans will go about AI is the future. My frustration with that statement is that if AI is the future, how do we then become part of that future? I mean, even in South Africa, if you look at socio-economic issues that we are facing as a country, we are having leaders that are making decisions for the future they're not going to be part of. And you find that youth unemployment is high. So leaders are making decisions of which they're not going to be part of the future. And the youth doesn't participate elsewhere. And I think right now we're having a lot of people that are sitting home. And they're like, okay, fine, I want to engage in this AI. But like you said, they don't understand the model. They don't understand how it works. How do you think education plays part in this?
Well, just a comment on that. You know, if you see that the AI policy of South Africa that was developed in 2024 was scrapped, right? Because they used false AI-generated references.
Oh, okay.
So the AI policy that South Africa launched and that it designed, the Department of Communications and Technology designed in 2024 has now been removed because they use fake AI sources to generate these policies, right? So, so at the moment, South Africa doesn't have any AI policy, so it's chaotic in that regard, but it does afford us an opportunity to put the beneficiary at the center of all of this. Because a lot of these policies are designed without, as I said earlier, understanding the complexity of that real world, right? So from an education perspective, you know, I, as a political activist in the 80s, where a lot of us fought, you know, against what we called the gutter education, the apartheid design education, I am appalled when I, you know, realized that the education that our children are getting in a free democratic South Africa are worse than the education we got in the 80s that we fought against. So education is vitally important, but it lacks. You know, to have a grade 5 child educated on the flying machine of Leonardo da Vinci, while foreign nationals like the Somalis come here and they teach their kids about the South African economy, and they send home every year billions and billions of rands that out of the informal economy that we're not challenging, you know, is a bit of a concern. But I do think that, first of all, a future South African economy is an emerging economy that is an integration of the formal and informal economy using these tools, and that we must begin to understand how, our children can be taught in terms of, first of all, understanding the environment they're operating in, understanding the practicality of where the opportunities lie, and then to design these solutions to cater for that, right? So when these AI algorithms are designed in America, like ChatGPT, and, it does not include or take in consideration what a child in the informal sector is faced with every day. But imagine a child can access an AI algorithm through his or her WhatsApp that is taught on the lived experiences or the realities of a township. And she or he wants to start a barber or a hairdresser and can actually interrogate that algorithm, and it can design a tailor-made business plan that speaks to financial implications at a bank level, at a government level, or a AI agent that at the same time can give notes on teaching these kids about the circumstances that they're faced with. Unemployment amongst youth is substantially high, and there's no point in our kids trying to get work in the formal economy because there's none. But if over 100 billion rand is repatriated out of the informal economy into Africa, why is it that our children are not in a position to compete for it? And the reality is that our education system is not up to scratch to do that. But having an understanding of these opportunities and having therefore the ability to convert it into a platform, a digital platform that can help them compete for it, that can help them navigate those complex circumstances, I think is what we need to do and look at.
Yeah, I think with my time on earth, about half yours right now.
Yeah, I don't know how old you are, but I'm going on 60, so...
I'm half that. I think one thing we have always realized, you mentioned just now as you were explaining to MJ, access. And I think that's where also we find this inequality of that, because right now we're saying that this is also through AI and blockchain as well, but also you're talking about people who are lacking access as well. So how do we go by providing remedies to that problem that we have? Because a lot of people struggle. I mean, yes, in the room we might have access to ChatGPT, we might have access to Grok, a lot of the AI softwares out there, but I believe there's so much more that we don't have access to, and I think that's where the inequality is really lying.
I think it sustains the inequality, to be honest.
Yes.
If you have large numbers of townships that in this day and age still don't have access to Wi-Fi, if you have to talk to governments and half beg them to make Wi-Fi available at schools so that communities can benefit from that. If you have the impact of apartheid spatial planning still very much, a part of our day-to-day living, where municipalities, and businesses still don't consider, townships as being valuable enough to make these kind of infrastructures available, then we have a substantial task ahead of us. But I don't think the change must come from people outside of the townships. Yeah. I think the change must come from within. And I think the lack of awareness is what we must address through education, through entrepreneurship, through making available tailor-made and structured, education processes, that kids don't have to go to university for 3 years. A lot of these guys, how a guy's got an MBA, right? He tells you, right? So I've got an MBA, and I can tell you that my MBA is irrelevant in terms of understanding what's happening in the townships. So these universities are pushing out graduates that has no understanding on how to compete for cash in the townships. And what you have is Zimbabweans, Somalis, Pakistanis, Nigerians, Bangladeshis taking home billions and billions of rands annually. And not the MBA graduate, not the white entrepreneur, not the black entrepreneur, not the youth, not the unemployed youth, has any sense or an idea on how to compete for that money. But now imagine we can design tech solutions that will not just enable our children to become aware of that, but will exponentially improve their know-how on how to compete for that. Right? You don't have to have a university degree to be commercially viable in the township. You just have to have an awareness. And that awareness needs to be inculcated in the design phase of these tech solutions, which, quite frankly, I don't see anywhere. So yes, it is something that must be driven from within. We should stop relying on other people saving us. We must become the change we want to see in our own environments, and it's not sufficiently there, right? But your type of podcasts, this is the kind of awareness that you need to drive at.
Yeah. So I wanna touch more on capacity. Do you think we've got, as a country or as a continent, we've got capacity to execute at that level? Like I hear you, we shouldn't depend on the outside world to come and rescue us. But do you think we've got the capacity to do it on our own?
I think we have the potential, right? I work and I live in the informal sector. And I think, I just see ability and talent, right? And I also see young children that wants to make a difference, in their own lives. There are, of course, challenges, but we need to look at our education system differently. So we may have to begin to look at different ways of educating our kids, like through action learning. So you learn through mentorships, right? So some of us who's gone through the process, when we create our companies, it shouldn't just be to create shareholder value. It must in particular be to create stakeholder value. So stakeholders, a young child, young kids in the township, youth, that has the potential, and how we involve them is not just to see them as, people that can work for us, but certainly how, what we've built and what we continue to build can expose them to a learning process, an action learning process. Like I said again, you don't have to go to university to be competent, right? But the foreign nationals have proven that over and over and over again. They come here with nothing, but they make the money we can't make. So I think the capacity is there, but we have to collectively begin to understand how to unlock that. We've got to become aware of our circumstances where we live, and we need to understand that those circumstances we must convert into strategic values for us. Right? The formal economy, where your Capitec banks and your Absa banks and your Discoveries and all these guys are playing, are dwindling in resources. So what they're now doing is they're increasingly looking at what's happening in the informal economy. But why should we give that advantage to them? Why can't there be entrepreneurs who use their lived experiences that is not even written up at universities, that is not part of boardroom strategies? How can we not convert that into strategic value and build action learning to unlock that capacity so that we can have entrepreneurs in the informal sector that can drive the integration of the formal and the informal economy from a township perspective? And that, I think, is exciting for me, because that ability, that complexity is what must drive the design of these digital tools, which currently is not the case.
Could AI possibly widen the inequality?
It is currently doing that. AI, it's a two-edged sword, I think. At the moment, agentic inequality means that the haves have access to AI. And, they develop all kinds of strategies that are bankable, that they sell and pitch to investors, and they convert that into money, right? On the other hand, because of the lack of infrastructure, lack of know-how, informal economy stakeholders don't have access to that. So the gap is not just maintained, it's widened. But at the same time, if we can develop these tools that are specifically dealing with those complex contexts that I was referring to earlier, we can lessen the gap almost overnight. In other words, if we can design AI tools that speaks to the lived experiences of these stakeholders, then we can narrow the gap. Like I said to you earlier on, these formal economy businesses can only survive if they go into the informal sector, because that's where the clientele is. That's where the mass numbers are. We don't understand that yet. But we have the lived experiences. When you go into the township, you can ask the gogo anything about the township, any question, she'll be able to answer you. You bring up an economics professor from UCT to the township and ask him the same question with all his degrees, he won't be able to do that. But it means there's a disparity, there's a difference, there's a strategic advantage that we now need to utilize to build these tools. So, whilst it is maintaining the differential because of lack of access, I think by turning it on its head, by designing solutions that are build on the lived experiences and understanding of the complexities in the townships, we can almost overnight address and redress the situation.
And where does the blockchain fit into all of this?
So blockchain, in basic, simple terms, is a data ledger. Right? So a ledger in economic terms is something that records value. So in the case of the blockchain, it's a data ledger because it records data as value. And the data is valuable because it's verifiable and it's tamper-proof, right? So when you generate data and the data is verifiable at that level, it has value. But it is the kind of value that then feeds into an algorithm that then can process the data and create even further value because it can analyze it, can process it, it can convert it into strategic plans, right? And so the combination of AI and blockchain is, in my view, what will be shaping the landscape, the socioeconomic landscape going forward. So banks like Capitec Bank, ABSA, all of these banks, they are now changing their strategies in becoming data management companies. And when you look at a Capitec Bank, for example, and you understand that 20 million of their consumers or their clientele is from the informal sector, for them it's about generating data, right? And verifiable data, and the blockchain can do that. And when you have verifiable data and they use their AI processes, there's all kinds of mechanisms that can lead to value that the AI can extract. My interest, my personal interest that I've been working on the last 8 years is the agricultural supply chain. And I was saying to you earlier, the analogy that we were drawing on was in the Eastern Cape, you have white farmers, cattle farmers that's been farming for 5, 8 generations. They know how to farm, but they got one challenge. When the animal is born, the animal needs to be fed for 30 months before it can be slaughtered. So they've got no cash flow. But around them, there's townships, numerous people that are unbanked, underbanked, that are sleeping with cash under their beds. Now the animal is born and we tokenize it, we create a digital version of the animal and we fractionalize it in 10 parts, of 100 Rand each. The gogo can come to the farmer, or many of them can come to the farmer and say, we'd like to buy, a tenth of the animal. Here's the cash flow for you to grow these animals over the next 30 months that you don't have. But when an animal gets to slaughter stage, the animal is worth 30,000 Rand, which means conceivably or theoretically, your 100 Rand has become 3,000 bucks. Now, if you put 100 Rand into any bank for 30 months, it won't increase to 3,000 Rand. But basically what you're demonstrating is that you're using technology in an equitable manner, right, to integrate the formal and the informal economy. And that's the kind of stakeholder value that we need to begin to think of, right? And in the process, while doing that, you can create in that supply chain that you're digitalizing substantial amount of new skill sets that kids in the area can learn from and be reskilled and upskilled to continue to create value going forward. And that's the kind of stuff I don't see here.
Yeah.
I don't see newness in thinking. I see the maintenance of what is and what has not worked for many, many years.
All right, so my good sir, thank you so much. I think we've got like 5 minutes left. I would really want to give an opportunity to our audience to ask questions if they have questions. Anybody? All right, I see there's a lady at the back there. Can she be please assisted with a microphone?
Can please get a mic?
Can we get a microphone for our lady there at the back? There she is.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, this may not exactly be completely directed to anybody, but I did hear Mr. Adams. I did hear Mr. Adams talk mostly about the gap in knowledge that people have, especially in the townships and in the villages. And I would just like to ask if someone had an idea of how to close that gap, but did not know where to go to get investments and to get assistance. Where would you say they must go? If someone had a proposal completely ready and they have a way that they've been seeing that this gap needs to be closed, because it's not only just the people that already know from Instagram or from trying out certain things, but in the village, mostly in the Eastern Capes as well, you do find a couple of people that have no idea what the blockchain is, what Forex is, what any of that is, and they have a lot of potential, but they can't get out of their areas. If someone knows of a way and they have a proposal of how to get them out, but is lacking, let's say, is lacking backing, investments, and the help that they need, where would you say they must go to present their proposal to get assistance for such?
I think that's a very good question, and I think it's a very important question. And sadly, I think the answer is that these kind of institutions are not prevalent and are not easily accessible at the moment, right? To actually satisfy that great need that you've identified. I think at the same time, it presents an opportunity to begin to think around, how to create these kind of institutions. A lot of the current challenges with our education system is that it's not providing a need to drive and address actual issues that are so prevalent in our community. So, but there are individuals, there are, a network, a growing network of, people in the tech space that thinks differently about, how to create solutions for the kind of challenges that the township stakeholder may face. And so they are out there, but at the moment, sadly, it's not a prevalent opportunity for our people. But, at networking sessions like this, we can talk, one can advise, one can refer, but the answer is it's not as prevalent as it should be at the moment. Sadly so.
Right, I think we've got a minute to take another question. If we've got somebody on the ground to ask a question, you can just raise your hand and you'll be assisted with a microphone. Anyone from the floor? All right, I think we can simply wrap it up. My good sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Any last word from you?
I think agentic inequality is a real issue. I think, agentic equality is what we must strive for. And I think what I want to leave you with, when we look at designing these kind of solutions, it's not about creating shareholder value only. It's predominantly about creating stakeholder value. And what that means is that one has to begin to understand the needs first and then design the solutions to optimally satisfy that. And I'm not seeing it at the conference at all.
Right. I think you can wrap it up.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Evans. For myself, Ngobile Tambani, and my amazing co-host over there, MJ Givens, Khasi.
We are out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.